Hello and welcome from my side to our introductory session to SAP Cloud ALM. In this session, we want to talk about how customers can benefit from using Cloud ALM for service, what functions they can use, and give you an overview of how overall the usage of Cloud ALM for service at customers would look like. We'll start with a short introduction to Cloud ALM for service, and then look a little bit more into the details. Now, if we talk about Cloud ALM for service, or in general about service delivery, we have to clarify a few of the terminologies first, because of course, service is a very broad term that is used in various areas at SAP. And we have a very specific meaning of the word service in mind. So let's think of a customer that is implementing maybe S/4HANA, a few cloud applications, and they have an SAP support contract to get help in case they have issues in their solution landscape. On top of that, customers can also sign or get so-called service contracts. So let's imagine if you have a car, you have a problem at your car, you recognize the brakes are broken or something like that, you bring it into the shop and it gets fixed. But you can also say, oh, on top of that, instead of waiting for the lights go on, for the brakes to actually fail, I can submit my car to regular checks, even though nothing is broken, and then my car will be checked and there is a chance to see upfront, oh, your brakes are close to breaking, so let's exchange the brake pads, or let's change the oil because it's close to have to be changed. And something similar we offer inside SAP. Yeah, so on top of the normal support contract, customers can sign service contracts to make use of the expertise that we inside SAP have when it comes to the potential risk, the potential issues, the potential optimization potential that customers have when it comes to operating their solution landscapes. These service contracts exist in different levels. So you have an SAP Enterprise support contract. You also have something that we call SAP Active Attention contract, and then we have sort of the most premium one, the SAP Max Attention contract. There are various other service contracts in the different areas. So we have something called Preferred Success for the cloud solutions. But just to clarify, this is what we mean when we say service. So we are talking about customers who have signed a service contract with SAP and that are getting services delivered as part of that service contract. So services in the sense of we're checking the system landscape, we're checking their operations procedures, we are maybe optimizing the runtime of specific transactions, specific functions. We are improving their data volume management concept. Yeah, so there are various levels of various services that SAP offers for customers who have signed such a service contract. These services basically come in all shapes and sizes. So there are remote services where people from inside SAP log onto a customer system and remotely analyze, do a checkup, and provide recommendations to the customer, what can be improved. There are also services that happen on-site at the customer, meaning SAP consultants physically go to the location of the customer and provide a service delivery. There are automated services. There are services that take half a day. There are also services that take something like a couple of weeks. So all shapes and sizes, as I said, and all of these are, or not all of these, but these services are available to customers who have signed service contracts. And depending on what service contract you have signed as a customer, you have various services that could potentially be delivered to you. Now let's imagine a customer that has signed such a service contract. Let's think of a customer who has maybe signed a max attention contract. So they have a project, They have their S/4HANA implementation. They are implementing a couple of cloud applications as well. And now they get various of these services delivered. One thing that customers, of course, struggle with there is to stay on top of their service delivery. It starts with really simple things to just know what kind of services are being delivered, what was delivered in the last month. Is there something delivered in the next 3 weeks? What's the status of the preparation for these service deliveries? Very often, as part of service deliveries, customers have to provide certain information. They have to provide system access. They might have to even implement certain SAP nodes to get the system ready for the service delivery. So to stay on top of that for customers right now, all of this happens via email, is very difficult. It's especially difficult, of course, if there is a short-term change on the customer side of the involved people. So for instance, if someone falls sick, someone else has to step in. It's difficult to have all of that information in one place because you basically have to chase emails in that situation. Yeah, it's also very difficult for customers to have an overview about what the outcome of the service deliveries was. So they might know, we had a service delivered 3 weeks ago regarding our data volume management concept. What was the outcome? Were there any findings? And what's the status of these findings? Were there any issues identified? Have they been resolved? Is someone working on that? That is also difficult for customers, requires a high level of manual effort at the moment to follow up on that. And what SAP is now doing is providing a solution that helps customers stay on top of their service deliveries. The first thing to mention here, so we are now providing with Cloud ALM for Service a platform, a collaboration platform for managing service deliveries. It's a cloud-based solution. That, first of all, is something that greatly reduces the total cost of ownership for customers. So that was one of the disadvantages that we had, for instance, with Solution Manager, that kind of also attempted to be such a collaboration platform on the customer side, but it was operated by the customer. It meant the Solution Manager had to be upgraded, nodes had to be implemented, users had to be created, all of that within the customer responsibility. By now bringing this into cloud, we greatly reduce the amount of work that the customer has with operating Cloud ALM for Service in general. Yeah, so SAP makes sure that the application is always at the latest software level. SAP makes sure that bugs get fixed. The customers don't have anything to do with keeping the software up to date for SAP Cloud ALM. So it greatly reduces the effort that is required on the customer side. By providing the collaboration platform, the idea is that we have one central platform via which all communication, all exchange of information between SAP and the customer happens. So all the people involved in the end-to-end service delivery process. Our vision is to also include the partners, of course, in that, because sometimes we also have partners that are included in the service delivery process, and to share anything, documentation that is required in preparation for the service, action items to prepare the service, action items that come as a result of a service delivery. So all of that should be shared via Cloud ALM for Service. Obviously, the idea via that is to increase the efficiency of the collaboration. So as I said, you don't have to chase emails anymore. And on the long run, also to standardize the way we deliver services, to standardize the outcome of service deliveries, and provide them provide the result of service deliveries in a digital format that is easier to find, easier to consume, and that ideally can also provide the basis for further analysis for the customer. Right now, we are targeting, or we are providing these functions for service deliveries as part of max attention, active attention, and enterprise support services. However, this is just the starting point. So our goal very clearly, we'll see a roadmap at the very end. Our role is to also provide this collaboration platform for all kinds of services, for all kinds of service contracts. Yeah, so including preferred success and including further contract types. What will change with the service delivery? In Cloud ALM for Service, we are providing the customer with 3 major capabilities. The first one is the Service Delivery Center, and I'm just going to use the Cloud ALM demo tenant. There is a link later on in the slides to where you can find that demo tenant to give you a short overview about the capabilities. I'm not going to go into the details how these capabilities will be used. There is a separate session that was conducted by my colleague Preeti that you can refer to if you want to see the usage of the tool live and in action. But just to explain overall what these applications are and what the purpose of these applications are, I also want to show you in the system. So the first one is the Service Delivery Center. The Service Delivery Center is your central access point for anything related to service deliveries. So that's the place where you go in, where you can find all services that have been delivered in a certain time frame. Now, I have to remind you, this is a demo system. So in this demo system, we don't have a continuous stream of services going in. So let me just restrict it here to the entire year. And we can see, so there are 2 services this year that we have in for our demo customer. One is a technical integration check, and the other one is a going live support session. The one going live support session here was conducted late in January, and the technical integration check is due in March. And the idea is, as I said, it's my central access point to anything that has to do with service deliveries. I can find all my service deliveries here. I have access to various details for all my service deliveries. I know what are my preparation tasks that I have to work on. So anything that I want to find out about service deliveries, I can find out via the Service Delivery Center. And of course, the advantage being that if I have it all in one UI, it's easily accessible, it's easy to get transparency, it's easy to see the history, the current and the scheduled services. And that alone already is something that a lot of customers struggle with because, as I said, right now we don't have a collaboration platform in use there. So even to know we already had a technical integration check for a specific service ID delivered in the last 6 months is something that at some customers is very difficult to find out. And that, of course, is very easy to find out here via the Service Delivery Center. The second application that we have are the service results, or is the service results application. So that is something that we provide per service. So with that, let me actually, because I think these services don't have a service result yet, so let me just quickly extend the date range here that we can also have a look at services from last year. So I'm going to go here into the technical integration check session from July. And I can find here in the service results, my service result, and can have a look, okay, for that specific service, this was the outcome of the service result. There is a management summary. There is certain information regarding my business processes, solution landscape, and so on. Yeah, so I have a service result application here. I can find some text here. I have a standardized way, regardless of what service was delivered, how I can find out the service result and to navigate within the service results. And then the third application that we have is the issues and actions management. So part of a service delivery typically are actionable items. So something where we from SAP side tell the customer, oh, we've identified something where you can improve, or where either there is a risk and you should do something to prevent that risk from affecting you. And typically how we document that is as issues and or actions. And of course here, the idea is, so if you can look here, for instance, here in this service result, we do have quite a lot of, or quite a few, not a lot, but a few issues and actions included in the service result, because they were an outcome of the service result, of the service delivery. But of course, the customer now has to work on these issues and actions and has to resolve them. And that is not very convenient to do that via the service results, because then you have to know, oh, which service this issue originated in. And in order to enable the follow-up on this, we have a separate application, the issues and action management, that allows the follow-up by customers here. So I can see for our demo customer, in my service result, there were just 5 issues. Overall, you see there are 26 issues here available for the customer. Some of those have already been resolved. Some of those are in progress. And I can work as a customer, can work on these issues and actions here, and track the resolution of these identified issues. So those are the 3 applications that we have available. How it will work in general is that from SAP side, we have SAP internal applications for Cloud ALM for service, and we have the customer tenant for Cloud ALM. Our SAP consultants delivering a service typically work here on the SAP internal side. The customer works in the Cloud ALM tenant. Typically, it's not required for SAP consultants to log on to the customer Cloud ALM tenant. However, of course, if our SAP consultants work internally, document their findings there, document their service results, that information has to be brought over to the customer tenant some way. And the way this is done is via a data replication mechanism. SAP internally, our applications are also based on Cloud ALM. Look and feel is very similar, SAP internally. Obviously, there are a couple of things available internally that are not available in the customer tenant. So for instance, we have a set where we maintain our templates for service deliveries. That is something that's only required for SAP consultants. So those are not available in the customer tenant. Yeah, just as an example. So there's in general, there are some functions. There's also some information that is only available internally, and then some information that gets replicated to the customer. The applications that we have SAP internally are more or less the same, at least from the look and feel. As I said, they're slightly different, but to the end users, it looks very, very similar. And the idea, of course, is that we have via the service delivery center, for instance, the joint view on all service delivery, yes, deliveries of a customer. So if the customer logs in his Cloud ALM tenant and checks what are the service deliveries that are supposed to happen in the next 6 months. That's the same services that he or she sees there, that the SAP consultant sees when logging in SAP internally and checking there what are the next the SAP services supposed to be delivered at that customer in the next 6 months. We have on the SAP internal side also a connection to a few SAP internal systems, because our systems of record are actually not inside Cloud ALM. These are separate systems. So we have APIs and ways how the service information get pushed in there. And it's also something that for us, because we have a service delivery management platform, only services that have reached the status delivery confirmed are loaded into our SAP internal Cloud ALM applications, and then from there replicated to the customer. So it's the same here for the service results. Our SAP consultants write their findings, write their service results in the SAP internal tenant. There are certain functions for quality assurance, for instance, and once we say, yes, this service result is now in a state that it can be shared with the customer, it's set to a status, it's replicated to the customer tenant. And the same for issues and actions. If the service consultants identify issues, provide recommended actions that should be executed by the customer. Again, there are quality assurance functions also in place, SAP internally, because we want to make sure that you don't get fragments of issues, you get the final thing. And once the quality assurance has been completed, the information is replicated to the customer, where now the customer can go in and track the completion status of the issues and actions. We will see that this data exchange depends on the agreement of the customer. So this is not there by default, but it's something that customers have to explicitly agree to. We know that some customers, at least for now, maybe some also for the foreseeable future, will not agree to that data exchange. So this is completely within the discretion of the customer. They can decide, do they want to use Cloud ALM for service or not? Of course, we from SAP side think it would be very beneficial for customers to use this, and we highly encourage customers to not only to commission a Cloud ALM tenant, but to consent to the data transfer. So what does the high-level process look like? Again, as I said, for the detailed usage of the application, so how does it really look like, every single thing in the system? I refer you to the separate session by my colleague Preeti, who did a detailed system demo for this. But we want to go here at least high level through the process. And we start with the prerequisites, because I already touched on that a little bit. This is an important one, and it's something that every customer has to make a conscious decision about. So we said Cloud ALM for Service contains an SAP internal part. It also contains a customer Cloud ALM tenant part. Both these parts can communicate with each other. The communication is bidirectional. So if the customer agrees, both data from SAP is replicated to the Cloud ALM tenant of the customer, but also backwards from the customer tenant to SAP. And we'll have a look at what kind of information that is. So the first thing customers have to do is they have to commission a Cloud ALM tenant if they want to use Cloud ALM for Service. The second thing they have to do is, we've had a bit of an internal debate here. Probably before that should come the discussion, do we use Cloud ALM for Service? Yes or no? In any way, they need to create users in the Cloud ALM tenant first, because this consent for data replication, you need to have a user that has the necessary authorization to do that. So by identifying who is the person that can decide, do we want to use Cloud ALM for Service, yes or no? You decide that's going to be my service administrator, and you create the user for that person and provide the project administrator role and the services administrator role. Why also the project administrator role? Basically, for issues and actions, we are using the project management part of Cloud ALM, and in order to have full administrator rights there, you also need to be able, need to have the project administrator role as well. That user now has the authorization to give the consent for data replication. The consent for data replication is given once per tenant. If the customer decides to use Cloud ALM for service, they have to decide basically per tenant, do we want to have the data replication active? Yes or no? Customers who have more than one customer number with service contracts can, in theory, have several, actually also in reality, not just in theory, can have several Cloud ALM tenants and can give data replication consent in each of these tenants. However, per eligible customer number, we request that the consent is given only in one tenant. Yeah, normally it shouldn't be possible that you have more than one tenant per customer number, but we've seen a couple of situations where customers somehow manage to achieve that. If you achieve that, please give the consent only in one tenant, because otherwise inconsistencies in the data might occur. So you give the consent for data replication, and then you can start using Cloud ALM for Service. Let's talk a little bit about efforts here. Commissioning the Cloud ALM tenant is something the colleagues from Cloud ALM typically say that takes 15 minutes. I haven't really seen anyone contesting that information, so it seems a very reasonable estimate that within 15 minutes you are able to commission your Cloud ALM tenant. Yeah, so that's 15 minutes. Creating the users in Cloud ALM in a Cloud ALM tenant, the actual user creation is maybe 2 minutes. Of course, the decision process behind that, who should be the service administrator, who can make that choice, do we want to have the data replication active, yes or no, that might take a little bit longer depending on the individual customer. The consent for the data replication, again, is something you have to read through a little bit of text, and then you have to press that you give consent. That's again, maybe 3 minutes. And then you're ready to use Cloud ALM for Service. Yeah, so you see from an effort perspective for a customer, it's very quick. It's not an extensive set of activities that need to be executed. One last point regarding the data replication. Customers who have given the consent for the data replication can also revoke that replication at any given time. Yeah, so it's completely up to the customer. They decide to what extent they want to collaborate with SAP. Okay, then let's have a look at the process. And as I said, within that process, we're not going to have a look at the details of the usage in the system, but we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of data gets transferred, because this is something, of course, where customers kind of need to get a feeling for, okay, what impact is it going to have if I consent to the data replication? What kind of information is then transferred back to SAP? So we have the preparation, the delivery, the reporting, and then the follow-up as part of a service delivery. And it always starts inside SAP. Yeah, so inside SAP, we create the service delivery. We don't have any capabilities to request services in Cloud ALM for Service. This is a question that sometimes comes up, but we don't have that. Not really sure if this might come in the future or not. So right now we don't have it. SAP, the SAP internal part of Cloud ALM, gets the information. There is a service delivery scheduled for this customer. If the customer has given consent for the data transfer, that information is replicated to the customer tenant. If the customer has not given consent, that information is not replicated. Yeah. So the part on the SAP internal side, more or less, would still work the same. We simply wouldn't replicate that information to the customer. And in that case, of course, the collaboration would have to happen the old way, how it is happening now outside, or how it has happened in the last 10 years, basically. Yeah. So inside SAP, we have the creation of the service delivery. We would have the creation of preparation tasks by the delivery team, the creation of the agenda, of the documenting of the scope, the documenting of maybe the preparation call. The SAP consultants, when they create that information, they have typically the choice that they can say, is this internal information? Then it does not get replicated to the customer tenant. Or is that external information? Then it does get replicated to the customer tenant. Anything that's deemed to be external gets replicated to the customer tenant. There it's visible to the customer. And if it's an actionable item, the customers can work on it. So for instance, if you have a preparation task, oh, please open the system connection, then of course the customer is the one that has to open the system connection. And once they have opened the connection, they should report that information back to you and say, yeah, it's open now. And that information is replicated back to SAP so that the consultants know, yep, that preparation task has been taken care of. So changes to the preparation tasks are reported back from Cloud ALM to SAP. In addition to that, customers can provide notes and attachments in preparation for the service delivery. So we typically have things like, I don't know, system landscape information, operations handbook, testing strategy, documentation. These kind of documents typically are PDFs, yeah, some kind of documents. They can be provided to the SAP delivery team via Cloud ALM. So the customer can upload them. The customer does not have that differentiation between internal and external when they upload documents or when they create notes. So everything that they upload there will be replicated to SAP. It might also include things like if you go on site, sometimes customers have security training that you have to take before you go, before you're allowed on the premise. So they might provide you that information, or they might have a set of hotels that are recommended to stay in, or even simple things like, okay, that's the address where our service delivery is going to take place. So all of this can be provided here by the customer and is replicated back to SAP. Then during the execution of the service delivery, typically what happens is during the service delivery, already issues and actions are documented. And depending on the length of the service delivery, things like daily wrap-ups are sometimes conducted. And these informations can also provide it, of course, to the customer as part of the service delivery. So for issues and actions, for instance, if you have identified an issue during a service delivery, it's already completed, you already have the recommendation, and it's urgent for the customer. Of course, you don't wait for the service delivery to be finished. You can also already during the service delivery tell the customer, here's the issue, here's the recommendation, here's how you get rid of that problem. And then customers can already start working on this during the service delivery. So while the service delivery is still ongoing. Yeah, so during the service delivery, information can be provided. It doesn't have to be just at the end of the service delivery. And then once the service delivery is concluded, you document the results of the services, you have document your issues and actions. As I mentioned, you have a QA process on the SAP internal side, where you make sure that what you've documented, there are no typos, there are no grammatical errors. it logically makes sense what you're documenting to the customer, and then the customer receives the service result in the Cloud ALM tenant. Now, if the customer does not have a Cloud ALM tenant, as I said before, they will get the service result the same way they have gotten their service results the last 10 years. Yeah, so we have not changed on any of the existing processes. What we are providing here at the moment with Cloud ALM is sort of an additional way that the customers can receive their actionable items, their service result. And last but not least, once the customers, the service delivery has been concluded, customers typically start processing the issues and actions that were the outcome of a service delivery. They update the status, for instance, if they see, yeah, this action has now been completed. These status changes are replicated back to SAP so that, for instance, the TQM, which is the technical quality manager that Max Attention customers, for instance, has a chance of tracking the status resolution, status of the issue, and the progress of the resolution. And SAP might also provide additional information for issues and actions. So if the TQM or if the customer comes and says, oh, we've actually tried to execute that action, but we don't really know how to do that. Do you have assisting documentation? SAP can also go in and provide that additional information from the SAP internal applications of Cloud ALM. And then this gets replicated back to the customer. Yeah, so as I said, it's a bi-directional data transfer that the customer has to consent to. If they don't want to consent to this, the SAP internal side more or less works independent of the customer Cloud ALM tenant. It's just a question then of the customers not getting any of the information that we have available SAP internally. Okay. So much for the process. In the last 5 minutes, I want to give you some further information and an outlook, because of course, what we have now here for Cloud ALM for Service is kind of our first version. Yeah, so it's not that we say, oh, that's exactly the vision that we've had and we are done. There's nothing else to do. It's our first version, and we have loads of idea of additional functions, of additional features, additional use cases that should be integrated. To just give you a high-level outlook, what are the things that we are currently thinking about? Yeah, so there is more, but this is what is currently something that we are working with or that we are working on. So far, everything that we have is for manual service delivery. We want to also enable Cloud ALM for Service for a fully automated service delivery. We want to also include service deliveries for different service contract types. And here, one of the first ones that we want to address is preferred success, which is our service contracts for cloud customers. So we want to enable Cloud ALM for Service to also provide a collaboration platform for services delivered as part of a preferred success contract. We want to make use, so we have the first use cases that we're already working on using artificial intelligence and machine learning for data analysis. We want to improve the way we visualize, analyze data. So we want to see how can we data that we analyze, how can we visualize that in a way that it's also accessible to customers, that potentially customers can also use that as a basis for their own analysis. We also have the topic of customer self-services on our agenda. The points that we have in here, quite specifically, we don't really give, it's not a roadmap per se, so we don't say, oh, this will come then and this will come then, because for a lot of, we are kind of working on all of these things, but it's sometimes very agile, a very very flexible environment. So it's something that we are working on, and we hope to provide something in the near future, but we can't really give specific dates yet when this will come. Yeah, so we will of course update our documentation once functionality is available or close to becoming available, or once we kind of know this is now, we have target dates for this, but just for the moment, to give you an idea, we know it's just the first version. We have other use cases that we want to extend Cloud ALM for Service to. And these are kind of the next big topics that we are talking about. Further information for Cloud ALM for Service is available in our support portal. So there's overall a support portal available for Cloud ALM. There are subpages for Cloud ALM for Service. Within that, you see here at the bottom of the page is also a link for the expert portal for Cloud ALM for Service. So there you find loads of other documentation, and we'll also extend the documentation. Maybe one point here, because I haven't shown this yet. In general, Cloud ALM also works with what we call embedded help. So when you're within the application, you always have a chance by using this help icon here to have a look, what are the different parts within the application, how are they supposed to be used. So what we have in the support portal sort of comes on top of the embedded help that is already available within the application. Last but not least, the link to the Cloud ALM demo tenant. So this is our public demo tenant, meaning all customers can access this demo tenant. They can use this to have a look. How does it look like? How do the applications there work? How would it make sense to use this within our organization? This public Cloud ALM tenant does have an SAP internal counterpart. Yeah. However, just one disclaimer from my side. If you remember, if I go back here to this slide, I explained that we get our data from SAP internal systems regarding what services are scheduled. This demo tenant or this demo landscape doesn't have the connection to the SAP internal systems. So to a certain extent, we are faking the service entries there. So it's demo data that we've created. And because there is no SAP internal system behind it, there are very small things that will not work on the demo tenant. So just in case you're wondering, in an SAP, in your normal Cloud ALM tenant, you would always have the option then to see the service in a final status. This is something we can't do here at the moment in the demo tenant. Yeah, so all our services kind of still appear as to be open. That's just the way how we set up the demo data. Everything else should work as it works in also a normal customer Cloud ALM tenant. Yeah, and so you're welcome to try this out. The only thing that I caution you about, it's one tenant, one user, several people use that user. So it can happen depending on who last went in, that, for instance, the theme of the Launchpad looks slightly different. It can also, depending on who last entered the tenant. So it could be that, for instance, you put in a node, someone else comes in after you and deletes that node. Yeah, just that you're aware there are several people sharing that demo tenant. But I think it's a good starting point to try out and see what Cloud ALM for Service is about.